Good day, this is Dr. Ron McFarland, Ron, if you will, and with the cybersecurity update for August 30th, 2022. Let me adjust my camera. I'm coming to you from my home office. I'm a Santorini hat and a U-shirt. All places that I love. So let's see, August 30th today, we've got a few updates. And as you can see, my messy home office, I'm not this professional YouTuber, but I do want to share this information with you. So as I click through, a few notes on the presentation in general. Any information that is shown on these slides, this presentation, is publicly available. There's no sensitive information presented. And I mention that because I do work with an agency, if you will. So the content is presented for educational purposes. Items presented here are what's called fair use. This is all about sharing information about education, whatever your journey is, whether it's a student of cybersecurity, someone going to college, or a learner, let's say someone obtaining a certification, or just someone in general interest trying to pick up some ideas. Not about hacking. I'm not going to edit anything. I'm just straightforward. I might edit out pauses, but you get what you get here. Anyway, the links to the content that I review with you are presented in the references section as well. If you are using any content from the references in your academic work, or if you're a researcher, make sure you cite the work properly in either APA or MLA, or if it's a publication, whatever format they use. I just throw out the reference link. I don't format it for you. Now, Higher Vista, that's a website that I actually created, gosh, in the 90s. But I've really refocused it over time to educational content, including YouTube, Medium articles. I write things for Medium. My focus is, again, academics, research, it's IT, it's cybersecurity. I have a strong interest. I love this stuff. I love IT. It's always kept me happily and gainfully employed, and it's something that I really enjoy. So feel free to share this YouTube, this presentation. If you want the PowerPoint slides, pop me an email. I'll share them with you. Also, if you will, like this content, if you're getting something out of it, also, feel free to contact me through email, look me up on LinkedIn. We can connect that way as well. So what's up today? Well, I put August 31st. It's really, see, dynamic. August 30th. A couple of key points we're going to talk about. 20.6 million Indian companies, customers, PII possibly exposed. Karakoot, I think it's pronounced Karakoot, that's how I've been saying it. Group targeting healthcare industry, we'll look at that. Russian hackers turned their attention to Montenegro. Popular firewall software is vulnerable to attack, so we'll talk about that. Ransomware attack threat intercepts skyrocket in 2022. Of course, everything ransomware is going to the moon. CISA expanded its online vulnerability catalog. Actually, they enhanced it a bit. We'll look at that. A telecommunications company hack snags 3 more U.S. companies. In other words, this last item talks about how if an attacker gets into one organization, they can spread the wealth. Well, let's look at the first one. 20.6 million Indian companies. Vodafone, you may have heard of them. August 22nd, this month, CyberX9, a cybersecurity research firm, said that multiple vulnerabilities in the Vodafone Idea, the VI operating system, exposed call data records, and it included simple things like the time the call was made, the duration, caller's location, caller full name and address, SMS details, including contact number that the call message was sent to, so you have the to and from, all the information. August 24th, Vodafone acknowledged the errors in their VI system and indicated, I like how a lot of companies will kind of do a song and dance around things. They recognized the potential vulnerability, and it was immediately fixed through a thorough forensic analysis was conducted to ascertain, let's see, spell check, ascertain that no data was breached. So kind of like, okay, we got punched in the nose, but no blood is flowing. But does that make you feel comfortable? I don't know. Vodafone also indicated that the PII of 55 million people, not 20.6, including those who left Vodafone and those who showed some sort of interest in Vodafone, was at risk. So it was already fixed. I think what's kind of interesting is when a lot of these companies get caught with their pants down, excuse that horse example, that they often try to skirt responsibility. They don't own up to it. And this gives me that same sense when I've read through this content. Own up to it, you screwed up. So it looks like it's fixed. Vodafone is actually a good product. It's just the song and dance that some of these companies do when they are exposed. Anyway, Karakoot Group, they're targeting healthcare industry in general. Healthcare, you have all the PII, the HIPAA items, any kind of, even IP in healthcare. So CISA, and I'll mention CISA later on, it's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Trip over those words a few times. And the FBI released technical details about how Karakoot, a ransomware group, works via an alert. So FBI, CISA released an alert, and it had on it, according to the Department of Health and Human Service, DHS, the group, Karakoot, has been actively targeting U.S. healthcare and public healthcare sector since June. So pretty recently, at least 4 attacks that affected an assisted living facility, a dental firm, a healthcare provider, a hospital have been observed by HC3. Prior to the attacks, the attackers had conducted scanning, all the recon stuff we talk about when you're hacking. The recon includes scanning, the recon where you're looking for IP addresses, software vulnerabilities, etc. Collection on its targets were observed. Prior to the attacks, again, I'm not editing this stuff out, but prior to the attacks, the attackers had conducted scanning, recon, a collection of it on its targets for an estimated 2-month time span. And actually, in a way, that's kind of low in terms of recon. Oftentimes, with some other hacks that we've seen, whether it's nation states or some of these hacking groups, may lie silent collecting data in someone's network for a year plus. Oftentimes when you have nation states like Russia, China, Iran, they'll do that so they can see how the traffic's flowing, not to harm the system, but just to keep collection of information flowing to them. In fact, just as a side note, some nation states will implement a security posture for the organization that they're in, the host that they're in. So they'll actually prevent others from attacking it while they're silently waiting in the background collecting this information. So a 2-month time period is pretty nominal, pretty small. Following the attacks, the threat actors gained access to files. Of course, they got all the recon down, containing patient names, addresses, social security numbers, dates of birth, medical history information, medical diagnosis. By the way, diagnosis information can be held for ransom, if you will. Medical record numbers and health insurance information. So just some minor stuff, right? So later they threatened the victim organization, so the several groups that they got into, with ransom, unless a ransom was paid. Now the government, the U.S. government at least, has a broad policy, never negotiate. A lot of the companies will negotiate. And even if you negotiate, pay the ransom, do you really get all your files back? Do you really even get your files back? And if you get them back, is a duplicate out on the dark web for sale, for additional sale? You may be back in operation, but somebody's selling your information as a possibility. So the next, Karakoot, here's how it works, exploits common vulnerabilities. RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol. That stuff, that's old school stuff, not very secure. Log4j, that problem's been around for a bit of time. Right? That's also a logging issue. Let's see, legacy VPN appliances, again, old school stuff from SonicWall and Fortinet, were really kind of exploitable vulnerabilities. Some instances of, I want to highlight this, the unserviceable Microsoft Windows Server instances. Server 2008, etc. They're not serviceable, not serviced by Microsoft, yet companies still run this stuff. So CISA and FBI have recommended several mitigations. And now the bottom line, I always say, they mention this in, 50-page narrative. But I mention this often, and I will continue to do so. Software updates. If you're, for example, if your organization is moving from Windows 10 to 11, that would be a viable software update. Patch management. You want to run all the patches. I ran into a client a year and a half ago, and they employed 15 people in a manufacturing environment. IT didn't want to, get this, IT did not want to install the patches because they were afraid the patches had viruses. And while that may be true in some instances, aren't you, by having older and older software that's unpatched, more vulnerable? Anyway, patch management, patches, that is something that's also key. Replacement of older and even unserviceable software. If you're seeing something, if Microsoft is rolling things off and say, we're not going to support Windows XP anymore, you've got to do something with that XP machine. If for some reason you can't replace the XP machine, isolate it on a VLAN, a subnet, put it on a different segment of the network, just isolate that. If you can update it, my God, go ahead and through the process. Use a layered network architecture. Now, the SANS Institute in 2003, 2005, that area, came up with a layered network architecture. Most companies still use a very flat network. Once a hacker or nation state is in over that first firewall, router combination that a lot of small organizations have, they're into everything. It's like a playground for them. If you have a layered network architecture and put your more secure data in an enclave that's more fully protected, it's going to make it a pain in the tail for hackers to get through multiple firewalls and multiple IAM services like Active Directory to get to the crown jewels of the organization. So that's really the bottom line. This Karakoot hacking group, ransomware group, is targeting ransomware. They're sitting in, getting recon, that sort of thing, and they're exploiting real commonly known vulnerabilities. So work on getting updated, if you will. And if you're in cybersecurity, that's what we're all here about. That's how we want to help our clients. Good old Russian hackers turned their attention to Montenegro. Montenegro used to be like a friendly chum of the USSR, and just some history and second bullet here, in 2017, they joined NATO. So Russia, we're in this seemingly split in the world right now with the conflict going on between Russia, China, the US, EU, that sort of split. So Montenegro's security agency has warned that Russian hackers have launched a massive and coordinated cyber attack against the small state's government and its services. Montenegro is a small and beautiful country. And here's a quote: "Coordinated Russian services are behind the cyber attack," and there's multiple cyber attacks. And the ANB said in a statement, this kind of attack was carried out for the first time in Montenegro, and it has been prepared for a long period of time. Kind of maybe it was in translation. I think what the quote is saying, after reading around it, is that the security folks in Montenegro said they had been planning for a long time. They kind of expected this was coming, all the prep, and actually they've been able to thwart the attacks. But that's really the new phase of war, isn't it? Anyway, not to get too political, this is part of our culture, our environment, our ethos of what's going on in the world. Popular firewall software, you can see the Cisco logo. I love Cisco, really good products, good support, but sometimes, just like any large organization, they drop the ball. So popular firewall software vulnerable to attacks. Researchers at Rapid7, good organization, claim malicious actors can still exploit a vulnerability in Cisco firewall software using man-in-the-middle. Now, we talked about man-in-the-middle, where you inject some sort of process, if you will, and it works like you are in between A and B, who's sending and receiving data. You kind of interject, capture it, pass it on, and when you capture it, you replicate it, you store it, you use it, you abuse it. So that would be the man in the middle. That vulnerability, now if you look at the CVE is a vulnerability indicator, if you will. If you're not familiar with that, look up the National Vulnerability Database, and a lot of hackers will even use it, but we use it on the good side. That CVE 2021, so that tells you it was last year, 1585, is a vulnerability discovered in Cisco firewalls last year. So early at Black Hat, the hackers conference, Rapid7 noted vulnerabilities in Cisco's adaptive security software, ADSM, and firewall services software for the ASA, which were left unpatched for months. Now, so there's actually two things going on here. You got a CVE for 2021, 1585, that pointed back to Cisco's firewall. And then there's a more recent one, CVE 2022, 208 to 29. Rapid7 researchers confirmed that the newer one was patched. However, the older one can still be exploited. So Cisco kind of dropped the ball. They actually released a patch for the 1585, but the patch didn't work, and it's still out there. The bottom line with the National Vulnerability Database, say that quick, is that you can look at all the different companies will report to the National Vulnerability Database. The FBI, the Secret Service, the DivNet will place vulnerabilities out there. And so when other organizations are tapping in and looking at vulnerabilities and scanning the vulnerability database, they're actually doing a comparison with their network and what's on the vulnerability database. If they say, oh my goodness, we have 17 of these vulnerabilities, we better darn well patch them. So they go through and make sure they get all the patches. So if you're not familiar with that, go ahead and poke out on Google, look for a National Vulnerability Database, and it'll give you how that functions. So bottom line with this article is Cisco kind of dropped the ball. I love Cisco products. They always work. They're pretty solid. When I was doing the CCNA and CCNP and the security stuff for Cisco, I enjoyed the heck out of how it worked. Their documentation was great, so I feel like an advertisement, but just like any other big company, they dropped the ball on that one. So moving on, another ransomware. Barracuda, also a wonderful product line, but they also have a research arm, just like many other organizations do. In their new third annual research report, which analyzes ransomware attacks that occurred between August 2020 and July 2021. So it's really, July from August 1st to July 30th. So you're talking a full year, but they're looking in the past 12 months. So really, even though it's a new report, it's using legacy data in my mind, but it still gives us an idea of where, quote, the ransomware market is going. In the past 12 months, Barracuda researchers identified and analyzed 121 ransomware incidents. Certainly, that's not all the incidents because there were thousands of those. But within that 121, they saw a 64% increase in attacks year over year. So their sample set, they saw more and more attacks year to year. And we can see that both the FBI and CISA report an escalation in ransomware attacks. Attacks on corporate and businesses made up, attacks on corporations and businesses made up 57% of ransomware attacks. So it's infiltrating businesses. Well, before ransomware attack, when it started rolling out, really kind of hit the small business or individual. So that was kind of the target. If you're looking for lots of money, you're going to kind of shape things and point things in the direction of large organizations. So that's how that's going. 18% of incidents had ransomware attack. Ask less than. I'm not going to edit this. I'm just going to learn to speak correctly. 18% of the incidents had a I should write the darn thing right. 18% of the incidents that had a ransom asked less than $10 million. 30% had a ransom ask greater than $30 million. So you had 18% less than $10 million. I know some companies have been hit by $200,000. I think it's FUS, the Flagstaff Unified School District, a couple years back, got hit for a couple $100,000. So a lot of the ransomware is getting infiltrated to large organizations and businesses. So that's 18% on one end, 30% on the other end. That's 48%. So 52% fall in between 10 million and 30 million. Doesn't that make you feel kind of comfortable? Attacks in the past 12 months have expanded across the globe. We all know that. So that's the bottom line with this research. Some additional information here. Let's see. I think this is just about a duplicate slide, and we're going to move on to the next one. I'll take out the duplicate slide, so when I do share it, if you do ask me for it, I'm not giving you duplicates. There it goes. The next article, CISA expanded its online vulnerability catalog again. So CISA, we talked about, is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And the reason I always say CISA, because I trip over having to say security twice. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Security. On Friday, this past Friday, added 10 new actively exploitable vulnerabilities to its KEV catalog. This is why I am a tech guy and not an actor or a singer, if you will, because I stumble over my own words. So what the bottom line is, the issue with CVE 2021-38406, that has had a score of 7.8, which is high on the scale. Think of a thermometer. As it gets higher, it gets red, color-coded, and boom, you got to fix it right away. It impacts this thing called DOPS Soft 2, versions 2.0.07, and prior versions. A successful exploitation of the flaw may lead to arbitrary code execution. In other words, with this particular vulnerability, DOPS Soft if I was a hacker, I can inject code knowing this vulnerability and have the process run my own code in addition to its other code, or maybe even run the code and exit out, if you will. So Delta Electronics, DOPS Soft, lacks proper validation of user-supplied data when parsing specific project files, improper input validation. Now in software security, we talk about this all the time. You got to verify your input. Even things like, when you're hacking a website, you have to verify that input into a process like DOPSoft as well. So then you can inject code that you want to execute. It's worth noting that the 38406 CVE was originally disclosed as part of an industrial control system advisory published in 2021. Now, ICS stuff and even SCADA stuff is really highly vulnerable, just because it's been assumed that it was reasonably secured by obfuscation, not knowing, but now that's becoming a main target for factory floors, and I mentioned last time, water supplies that use SCADA, ICS, industrial control systems, may not be VLAN IP segmented properly, may be using older technology as well. I ran into a couple of devices that I'm stumbling over my thoughts as I shouldn't go ad hoc. This is why I shouldn't be an actor. The one device was actually 2G, so no security at all in 2G, but it was made for a cheap device, and a company was using that, so that was on their factory floor. So we fixed that as well. But however, there are no patches that address this particular vulnerability. So CISA says, hey, this is a big one. This is impacting a lot of the supply chain. And so they also issued another advisory on this. They expanded the KEV catalog and also added more content enhancing, if you will, the CVE 2021-38406. It's not that often that somebody will go back and kind of rehash and re-clarify and issue another alert, but with this one, it makes the factory floor a lot more vulnerable. These attacks follow a specific sequence of exploitation, and if you look at the attack chain that we talk about in hacking, let's see, involves web shells, crypto miners, botnets, spread the word, botnet, and remote access Trojans, rats, and those are good things in life, followed by an initial access brokers, IABs, that then pave the way for, again, ransomware. So you can inject these type of items into the software supply chain that impacts the hardware, lock up the whole organization with ransomware. Certainly not a good thing. And if we look at the defense industrial base, the supply chain for DoD, all the suppliers, manufacturers, the subs, tens of thousands throughout the U.S. And then when you start looking at what they have implemented in terms of IoT devices, SCADA devices, other devices that are really insecure, and you see a vulnerability like this, got some issues there. So that kind of explains that portion. I do want to highlight another item, and this will be the last one. I know I'm going a little long. Another telecommunications company snags 3 more U.S. companies. This is where a hacker can spread the wealth. Now, I've highlighted a couple of organizations here because we see and use these companies all the time. We hear about them. In recent weeks, security provider, I've always said Twilio, revealed it was breached by well-resourced phishers who used their access to steal data from 163 customers. Okay, so I purchased Twilio on the stock market, doing swing trading, I have to admit, and even some options as well. I think they're a good company. Again, they were breached by I like this how it was termed, well-resourced phishers. I'm not sure if that means a nation state. Anyway, well-funded. Security group firm Group IB, again, like Rapid7, a lot of security research is going on. Meanwhile, said that the same phishers that got into Twilio breached at least 136 companies in similar advanced attacks. So 163, 136. The 3 companies Twilio own, Authity, Password Manager, LastPass, I've used that before, and food delivery, DoorDash, some more, spread the wealth, in recent days have all disclosed data breaches that appear to be related to the same activity. Bottom line, well-resourced phishers got in Twilio, the security group, also recognized 136, so it spread the word. Authentication services, OKTA, Okta, and security messenger Signal, both recently said their data was accessed as a result of the Twilio breach. So having one component that's kind of a bad apple, not that Twilio is, it's more that they've been hacked, can lead to other organizations, as we've all talked about in other security conversations as well. So this is spreading the wealth, and the hackers will certainly take very much advantage of that. So again, it's part of it. You can think of it as a software supply chain, if you will. And again, the victims, customers also were not aware of these attacks. It is the ability of hackers to remain pretty quiet in the way that you set your things up, your attacks up can seem like normal traffic if you set it up properly. So the ability to remain undetected is a key item. Since March to August, if I do my math right, that's about 5 months, right? It's not uncommon for companies that announce breaches to update their disclosures in the days or weeks following to include additional information that was compromised. In other words, that's actually not only best practice, it's also a requirement in some security compliance realms, if you will. If there's a lesson in the whole, it is that the bottom line in this, we all talk about MFA, multi-factor authentication, or two-factor authentication. Not all two-factor authentication is equal. How all of this was revealed, the one-time password was sent by SMS or generated by authenticator apps, either one, SMS or authenticator apps, they're phishable, just like passwords are. And that's what allowed the threat actors to actually bypass the two-factor authentication and take over these accounts. So kind of tricky measures, but again, in cybersecurity training and education, we learn about how that is done. We even learn in some ways how we can do it with some of the tools available even on Google, on the internet in general. So that's kind of my long-winded update for today. Here's the references. What I'm going to do is, because I talk a little on a moderate basis, I'll make sure that the video's sped up a little bit for you. Here's the references. And again, if you like this content, just give me a thumbs up. I don't intend to be this YouTube star. I just want to share this information with my learners, that include both students as well as those who are taking cert exams, etc. So please share this link too and keep in contact. I'll post my info as well in the comments below, and let's have a good line of communication. So there you go. That's the update for today, and I'll share the wealth as well. Let me go ahead and stop this. Thank you so much. Take care.